Welcome to As I Live and Grieve, a podcast that tells the truth about how hard this is. We're glad you joined us today. We know how hard it is to lose someone you love and how well-intentioned friends and family try so hard to comfort us. We created this podcast to provide you with comfort, knowledge, and support. We are grief advocates, not professionals, not licensed therapists. We are you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back again to another episode of As I Live and Grieve. Love that you guys keep coming back to listen. I so appreciate it. I know I tell you that all the time, but I don't want you to forget. I want you to know that you are valued, that you, in the midst of your grief journey, at whatever phase you're in, that I love having you tune in and that you support me in my journey as well. Kelly's with me today. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening.
And with us today is a great guest, Ann Hince. She is going to have some great answers, and I know that because, boy, have I got some questions. She's got a tremendous story, and I know she's going to be very inspirational for everyone. So get comfortable, get your coffee, soda, well, I'd say wine, but I don't know what time of day it is where you're listening. So maybe wine, whatever. But get your liquid, your beverage, and settle in and listen. Ann, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the great introduction.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love your accent. I'm not sure where it's from, but it's intriguing.
Me too.
Okay, Ann, would you get us started by just introducing yourself to our listeners? Let them know, who is Ann?
Okay, thanks. My accent is mid-Atlantic. I'm actually from England, but have lived here in California since 1988. Okay. So a long time. I'm just like anyone else. I'm a mother, a wife, just nothing special, but I've been on this journey that has just been incredible. I mean, at this point, I can put my awareness inside of my body and release tension in my connective tissue and in my bones just through focused awareness. So I have shifted my skull bones and I've grown 3/4 of an inch in my 50s because I've released the burden. Well, a lot of us start shrinking around that age. So I've released the burden that I've been carrying all those years, and it's just allowed me to kind of decompress. And, you know, the biggest burden was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19. And that was the biggest trauma that was on top of many other traumas throughout my life. I was adopted. I was born with my right foot up against my right shin. So my whole body was kind of torqued. And once that was released at 6 weeks old, I was handed over for adoption. And we moved around the world to many different countries and different continents before I was the age of 16. So in different places, I had different traumas. So in Sierra Leone, when I was like 4 or 5, we had a house fire, and I was the one that woke up and saw the flames coming in through my bedroom wall.
Oh, my goodness.
When we lived in Hong Kong, so kind of the age from 7 to 11, I was in the car one day when my dad was driving back through a very crowded market. My brother and I went on the back seat, and trigger warning for people, but he accidentally drove over a girl's ankle.
Oh,
and
dear.
she was walking along holding her mother's hand. So that was quite traumatic. And at the age of 9, I was sent to boarding school in England. So you know, it's a long way from Hong Kong, a long way from everything I knew. And I was sent to a boys' boarding school, which was my brother's boarding school. There were some day girls, but I was the only girl boarder. And I was teased mercilessly.
I'll bet.
Yes. And so that was that. And then in my teenage years, both my parents became alcoholics. They always drank a lot, but they were definitely alcoholics in those years. And life at home was hell. And then I found my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19. But so that's the start. We can go from there.
Goodness. Okay. Well, that's so many talking points to start with, but that's an awful lot. That's an awful lot of trauma for one individual, especially a young individual, especially being youthful is very, very difficult. I know I read the little clip in your profile about finding your mother, and I can only imagine what that must feel like, regardless of age. But at 19, it's, you know, quite a start to adulthood. One of the things that really stood out to me in your profile was transformation. And you have actually gone through some physical and emotional and mental transformation. And we talk about with our grief journeys, how eventually we reach a point and we start to redefine ourselves, if you will. I know after my husband died, I told Stephanie, my older daughter, that I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore. And I feel like my entire life has been flipped upside down. I no longer have the routine I had. I no longer have the friends that I have. And I feel like I just have to kind of start over. And I don't know where to start. As I look back on that now, I realize I'm a completely different person than I was. I have transformed. I've actually transformed into someone, and I tell everyone that I'm happier now than I've ever been at any time in my life for many, many reasons. So I think of transformation. Now, so the very first and very simple one-word question I have for you to start is how?
Yeah, there's a lot to transformation, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I didn't actually realize that I hadn't dealt with my grief at all until I was in my late 30s. And it happened because two women, and these women were not like me. These women were strong, confident, authority type figures in my mind.
Okay.
And they told me, and I was this afraid, scared mother, very timid, who was just always afraid on the inside. They told me I'd done something wrong, and my mind just spun. I just could not stop my mind spinning for 3 days.
Wow.
And it was at the end of that, I realized, okay, this is not normal. And it felt like how I had reacted when my dad would tell me I'd done something wrong. So that was the little opening for me that, oh, maybe something from my past is still affecting me to this day.
Maybe.
Yeah, right. Looking back now, it's such a crazy thought because there was so much affecting me. But that was the little opening I had. And I think a lot of us who go through this journey don't really realize how grief is affecting us. We just go through life and we think, I had PTSD. Well, that was from, having a very angry dad, but it was also all the other grief, everything that I'd gone through it.
Sure.
Even though it doesn't look like grief. It really is. It's held inside of us. So I came across this technique he was a doctor's office. He was a holistic physician, and he recognized that I was way more stressed than I should have been. And he asked me on a scale of 0 through 10 what my stress level was. And I said 8. And he asked me why. And it was that question that made me realize, oh my goodness, the tears from my mother's death was still just under the surface 20 years later.
Right.
So he used this technique that's called EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique. It's also called tapping because we tap on ourselves as we talk through things. And he tapped with me about my mother's death, and I let the tears go. I told him things that I had been thinking, I'd thought inside, but had never expressed outside. He tapped with me for about 15 minutes, and I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death in my mind for the first time ever without the tears.
Wow.
And that's when I realized that we hold those emotions and the tears, right? We hold them physically inside our body, but that allowed me to realize we can let them go. So that was the first step on the journey. And I used EFT for years, and I realized what it's doing is it's opening up the subconscious mind. And as that happens, our self-awareness goes deeper. It's kind of one and the same thing. So that's how you can start going deeper and deeper, and you open up a memory. So my mother's death, I tapped about it multiple times from beginning to end, just telling the story over and over, allowing the emotions to release. And as you do that, the memories, you open up the memories, right? You have all of it stored inside of you, the whole event of what happened, but you don't always remember it because the emotions hold those memories down. So as you do it over and over, you just clear out the wound that was inside of you until there's nothing left, until it's just a story that I can tell you with no emotion.
Right. Now, we've done episodes with some other people on EFT, so this isn't a new concept to me. However, I've not heard it spoken of with such dramatic results. So the toddler in me, if you will, because toddlers ask these very innocent questions, and that's the intention of these questions, not to put you on the spot, but is it the tapping that works or the talking that works?
It's both.
It's the combination?
right? The tapping causes an interrupt into your nervous system, right? You're used to telling a story and you're used to feeling these emotions. Your body goes into an automatic response as you're reliving something from the past.
Mm-hmm.
The tapping interrupts that nervous system and allows that energy to release.
Okay. Does it make a difference where you tap?
Well, with EFT, it's specific tapping places, which are
Okay.
the ends of meridian systems. So there's generally 9 places that we tap on each time.
Okay.
Some people add a few more, a few less. Now, the difference between what I'm saying and what you might find online about EFT
Right.
is that a lot of people have moved more to the positive. Like they tap about positive, whereas EFT is working on the negative. It's working on what you stored inside, and it's only the negative that we store inside with tension or with emotions.
Okay.
So, you want to you want to say, I feel so angry about it, as opposed to, well, I'm going to let the anger go and feel peaceful about it, right? You actually have to feel the anger. You have to allow that thought and that emotion to come up in the body and tap it out until it's not there. So you just keep it's boring, right? You couldn't do it online because it's boring. You do the same thing, the same phrase or the same emotion. You tap on it over and over until it releases.
Okay. And our listeners couldn't tell, but as you were describing it, you were tapping kind of like the top back part of your head.
The crown.
Yeah, the
point.
crown of your head. Is
That's
that one of the typical points for tapping?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like me to go through them? It's nine
Absolutely.
points.
Absolutely.
The first one is the karate chop point on the side of the hand.
Okay.
And then you go up to the body, the crown point on the top of your head.
Okay.
Then the beginning of the eyebrow, and then the bone on the edge of the eye, then under the eye, then on the upper lip, then on the chin. 2 more points. The collarbone point, and then under your arm where the bra strap goes across, if you have one, about 3 or 4 inches under the arm. Those are the points. And you tap on it firmly enough to create an interrupt, right? But you don't want to hurt yourself, right? So you're not tapping so hard that you hurt yourself, but not, not so gently that nothing is going to happen.
Okay. And is there a certain rhythm, a certain tempo or speed of tapping, or does it change as you talk?
I recommend changing and doing it different tempos, right? You're just trying to interrupt the nervous system. So whatever works. And so my mother's death, I tell the whole story. I woke up that morning and it was quiet and she normally had the radio on, right? I just talk through what happened while tapping. And then if emotions come up, I notice what the emotion was. Ask myself, is that guilt? And if it's guilt, I would tap on the guilt. I'm feeling guilty. I feel guilty because I didn't hear her walk past my bedroom door. And then I'd carry on with the story. And at the end, I'd go back to the beginning and tap through it again, right? Until I could say the story out loud with no emotions, no resistance, right? There's nothing in me that says, okay, I don't want to say it again. Right. Willing to say it and willing to tell the story. And that's how I know that there's nothing left. And what happens at that point, or what happened to me, right? The memories stop coming up. Those emotions and those thoughts stop.
And those triggers. Up. So like the triggers that we all have?
Yeah. They stop because there's no energy underneath them anymore.
Okay. All right. Now, I have also heard that EFT is helpful if you have anxiety. It's helpful almost as a behavioral method or modality, if you will, to help you kind of conquer anxiety. Have you used it for that? Have you had any experience with that?
Yes, I've used it on myself and other people with that. Yes.
For anxiety.
It takes breaking it down. You'd start tapping on, I feel anxious. And then as that layer of the onion releases, then you start to become aware of, well, what is it I'm anxious about? What is it I'm afraid of? And then you tap through that. So it's kind of a layer by layer process, which is the opening of the subconscious mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does it matter? How do you know where to tap? What part of your body to tap on? Or
you just go through the same points.
You go through the same. So you go through all 9 points as you're talking.
Yes. Every time you use the same points. So you kind of get into the habit of, once you know the points, then you just circle around those points.
Okay. This sounds like it's something that's relatively easy to learn. It sounds like your therapist taught you very quickly, in fact. But for someone that was curious about this method, what is your suggestion about where should they start? Should they go find a therapist? or is this something they can learn about elsewhere?
I think it depends on the person. A
Okay.
lot of people do want help and need help because they can't find the words. I have some friends who can't find the actual words to use.
Oh, okay.
And as someone who's done a lot of this work, I can usually find the words for them. So
Mm-hmm.
that can help if that's you. But if you're someone like me who wanted to do it all themselves, who was
Mm-hmm.
not willing to be vulnerable with someone else,
Okay.
then go and search out Gary Craig's videos online. He was the person who developed the technique,
Okay.
and his videos are still available.
All right. Those videos probably be on YouTube then, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. But I like what you said. Sometimes it might be helpful to have kind of like a buddy, if you will. If you don't want to call it a therapist or a clinician, you don't have to. But just to have somebody kind of go through it with you, because it never occurred to me, being somewhat chatty. We were talking about that last night. In fact, the doll Chatty Cathy came up, and I swear it was named after me. But I've never had trouble, or I've had little trouble finding words, but other people might have difficulty, especially in relation to a traumatic incident or the loss of someone they love dearly, loss of a spouse or a parent, or heaven forbid, a child. So it would be helpful. Is it possible to find someone maybe not in the role of therapist, but someone that could just be your buddy, so to speak? An EFT buddy.
It certainly could. And, if you're tapping through something that you experienced and someone else experienced it as well,
Okay.
it would be really useful because they would be able to provide words and stoke your memory of what exactly happened.
All right.
And also, a lot of people tend to get off track. And sometimes it can be because the emotions are too much and they don't want to have to feel them, so they'll go into the future or they'll go into the past, but they won't actually go to what it is you're trying to work
what it is
through.
right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So bringing them back to that place. And I also should have mentioned that I do have a video about EFT on my YouTube channel. So you're welcome to check that out too.
Well, and you can repeat that a little bit later in the podcast. I'll give you an opportunity to make sure people know where to find that. So much of this I just kind of take for granted. And to me, it sounds almost simplistic, yet I understand how sometimes a disruption in the norm can cause, like you say, an interruption in your normal thought process. That if you're used to telling a story, for example, you just tell the story and you kind of detach yourself from it. But if you have to focus on something like tapping, it keeps you in that moment. Is that a fair statement?
It does. Yes. Telling the story keeps you in the present moment. Yes. And you need to be in the present to actually have those emotions come up in your body and to be able to release them.
And in another very simplistic thought, it's the present that hurts. We hurt now. We can talk about how it felt or how it might feel, but what we need to work on, what we need to deal with, what we need to heal is what we're feeling right now. And you made that point, and it's a perspective I hadn't thought of, but it's spot on.
It's living in the body, but it's in our subconscious.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we need to open it. And that's part of the thing that I realized through my journey.
Yeah.
We have so much tension stored inside of us that we're just not aware of. For example, a few years ago, once I was able to put my awareness inside my head, which was, a journey, I became aware of this incredible tension, pain inside my left cheek, which was almost unbearable. I could focus on it for a second, but it was just too much. So it's taken me many, many years. But I realized that pain was connected all the way through me to my right foot, which had been right up against my shin when I was born. So that talk throughout my body, the pain had been there for 50 years, and I had not been aware of it, which kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
But I realized we just hold so much, but it is subconscious. So this starts to open it up, which is healing at a really, really deep level.
Right. And we talk a lot about energy too on this podcast. And I've kind of become to think of tension in the body as negative energy. And that's why it hurts. And we often have so much negativity in our body in the form of energy, tension, anxiety, trauma, everything like that, that this may be a way to just help get some of that out. Now, you spoke about some physical changes to your body. Was that accomplished through the same method of tapping?
The tapping was really the first step on my journey. but
Okay.
it was probably the biggest step, made the biggest difference. And I
Okay.
could not have got to the next steps without doing
Okay.
that.
All
Right? It
right.
kind of removed all these onions, these layers of onion
Sure.
on the outside, so that energy was released. As I did more and more, I became aware at a deeper level. So self-awareness deepened.
Okay.
So I became aware of my emotions. Now, when I started the journey, I was not able to tell you how I felt my emotions. I didn't want to look inside.
Okay. I
But
get
as
it.
I did more and more, I became aware. I could say, exactly what I was feeling at any moment. And then I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions.
Okay.
So if we're feeling sadness, right, we're actually changing how our body feels in that moment, right? Frustration is an easier one for people to, I think, get hold of. For me,
Okay.
frustration is tension across my lower ribs, across my solar plexus area.
Okay.
Now, again, when I started, I would not have been able to tell you that.
Right.
I would know if I was feeling frustrated, but I couldn't tell you where I hold that tension in my body that I call frustration.
Mm-hmm.
So I became aware at that level. And then I would feel into those sensations. I would just feel the feelings, right? We have that phrase, just feel your feelings.
Right.
I would feel that tension and it would release. I could say allow it to release. It does that on its own. Once it's been felt for long enough, it releases.
Okay.
And then I became able to do that inside my body. So I can focus on the tension inside, and it really is tension, right? We could call it energy, but it's tension. I feel it in the issue,
right?
And I hold my focus on it, and it will release. So when I was able to do that, that's when I could start feeling the physical changes.
Okay.
My skull bones I could feel my skull bones relax, which is a crazy thing to say. I hadn't known they weren't relaxed, right? Until they relaxed and I felt them relax. And yeah, they've shifted around. There's more to do. I can see. I think eventually my face will become symmetrical. It's not there by any means at this point, but that's where I feel it's going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually we feel tension in our muscles, right?
Right. And the connective tissue is throughout the muscles.
Right.
But I'm kind of looking around inside. I'm sensing inside, and I believe it's through the connective tissue.
Okay. And how did you get from, how to word it? How did you get from the EFT to the awareness? How did that kind of shift for you, that it wasn't just the tapping anymore, it was internal awareness?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. At the time, I was in a group and we were studying A Course in Miracles, and the kind of guru in the group, the head guy, every week he would say, it's not about meditation, it's about feeling your feelings. And I was doing my EFT journey at the same time, like parallel with being in this group. And when I started it, I didn't know what my feelings were. So it didn't make any sense to say that. But as time went by and I did more and more tapping, and he said that, one day I thought, okay, let me see if I can do that, because I know what my feelings are now. I can feel that tension. So I was just doing the dishes one day at the kitchen sink, and I thought, okay, let me try and do it. And I can't remember what the thought was, but it was something like, I'm afraid of making a phone call, right? So I'd feel that fear, and I could feel it in my stomach, and I would try and just feel it. But I noticed if I moved, I would lose my focus on it. Or if I took a breath, I would lose my focus on it. So I would stand like a statue, just feeling that fear until I had to take a deep breath. And then I would do it again. I'd think the thought again. So you have to be at the place where you can realize you're having a thought and you can bring it to mind.
Okay.
So I'd think that thought again. I'm afraid of making this phone call. And I would do it again. And I just keep doing it. The same thing with EFT, you keep doing it until the emotion's gone. I would keep feeling it until the emotion was gone, until the tension was gone. And then it becomes easy to make the phone call.
Wow.
So then I would start doing that instead of tapping. I got intense with my tapping. So I would tap for an hour to an hour and a half every night. Went through all my traumas. I'd written them all down, multiple sheets of paper. And then I started doing the feelings, but I'd already done my childhood at that point. So I started doing collective traumas, like things like 9/11, right? I would bring those memories to mind, lay on the sofa, feel them, and they would release. So I would do that over and over again until at some point I was able to put my awareness inside my body.
Yeah. Now, have you kind of put all of this into a process, a method or something that you offer people to kind of help them get there?
I do, yes. Yeah, I wrote a book. And I wanted to write it because I didn't want to forget the details of the story.
Mhm.
So I have my book that's called The Pathway to Insight, but I also recently put together a blueprints to profound inner peace that's free on my website.
Okay. Free. Did you say free?
I did say free.
Okay, listeners, she said free and website. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. More about that in a minute. So, and that was, did you say blueprint to
Profound inner peace?
profound inner peace? Okay. Now, is this something, and I think I saw in your profile, or maybe it was on your website, I don't know which, because I visited both, that there seemed to be, or maybe it was my own insight, is there a trend that as you age, you have more of a desire to find this inner peace? Did that make sense?
Yes, and I think it depends on the person.
Okay.
There's definitely people who want to do this work, and there's people who don't want to do this work. And I find that so interesting because my brother, right, we were both adopted from different families into the same family.
Okay.
So we had different genetic makeup.
Right.
We both experienced the alcoholism, the chain smoking.
Right.
And my brother went that way. He became an alcoholic. He
Okay.
smoked, died already.
And you went
Right?
the other way.
I went the other way. And yeah, I always find that so interesting how
Yeah.
some of us want to do that. But it's often a big trauma. For me, it was like those two women.
Sure,
like that,
sure.
Me. So it's often something that triggers the desire, I think. But
right.
also a lot of us get older, we replay the same thoughts over and over, and we replay the same memories over and over, and we get tighter and we get stiffer and we shrink. And
I think, as you age and, the arthritis kicks in, and then you have all this inflammation in your body and you get more and more sore and everything. So is it possible then that starting something again, which sounds so simplistic as tapping, that you can kind of help yourself feel better?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it reverses the aging process.
Okay.
Yes, because you can tap about the arthritis, right? My joints are hurting.
That's what I'm thinking of. I have this one particular finger that's really, really bothersome.
So you would focus on it as you were tapping. Now, sometimes, so two things I wanted to share. Sometimes it can get more intense first.
Okay.
Because a lot of our pain is covered over by these memories and these emotions and this energy.
Right.
And as we clear that, the pain comes into focus, right? So there's probably one specific little place that has the pain, but it feels like it's more generalized.
Okay.
So it can become that. The second thing is I wanted to mention, a couple of times you said how simple it is. I think it is so simple. And I think sometimes that's the problem. People don't believe that something so simple can be so powerful. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a very valid point. Very valid point. So as I think again of our numerous listeners, and they're around the world, literally, we all talk about in grief, it's our heart that aches. That's where we localize it. It could actually be manifested in headaches, sore throats, a cough, whatever. It can manifest in a lot of different ways in our bodies, but we talk about our hearts. So can you tap yourself? Can you tap your way into getting some relief from an aching heart?
Yes, because you would tap on those words, right? My heart is aching. I can feel my heart aching.
Okay.
And then you also tap through the memories, what it is, why it is you think it's aching.
Okay.
And what I found, as I said, I can put my awareness inside, and I think I'm moving it through the connective tissue. So I can put my awareness someplace where I know my heart is, right? And it's the tension in the connective tissue that hurts the heart, right? I don't believe it's actually the heart itself. It's just the connective tissue, which is connected to everything, right? Our memories, our emotions are stored in there. And with the example with my foot and the pain in my left cheek all the way down to my right foot, who knows where it actually starts? All we have to do is find where it's hurting, or where the memory is, or what the memory is, or what the emotions are, and work with that, because that's all we have to work with. Right? We don't want to make something up and think, oh, well, it's the idea of my heart is hurting, right? What actually are the thoughts you're having, and what are the sensations you're having?
Right.
And that's what you can work with.
Interesting. Kelly, you're looking pretty pensive there. Are you tapping?
I was tapping on my karate chop part there. I find this all very interesting, and I definitely want to investigate more and see, because I have a lot of pent up, not dealt with grief that I think I could release with it. So I'm excited.
Good. Yeah, and I'm sure there are listeners out there that have been, for the last half part of this podcast or something, they've been tapping somewhere on their bodies. That's one of the wonderful things about podcasts and having them just audio is nobody can see what you're doing. So we could all be here tapping and no one would know it except whoever can see us. The thought of being able to make an aching heart better, that concept alone kind of fills me with peace because it gives me hope. It gives me hope that there is a method out there that literally is available to us at no cost. Maybe initially there's a slight cost as we learn to do it, whether we buy a book, watch videos, whatever, engage with a buddy, but it's available to us. We don't have to worry about our insurance paying for it. We don't have to worry about refills. We don't have to worry about side effects, anything like that, that I think a lot of people should really consider this. So it is time in the podcast, and I always feel sad when this happens because we start to run out of time. But before it gets too late, too long, I want to actually turn the microphone over to you, Ann, and let you speak directly to our listeners. Please let them know more about your book, about your website, about any services you may offer, any resources, any help you may give them. This is your time and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I just want to add something to what you said about letting go of the aching heart. The key thing that I didn't realize, and most people don't yet, is that those thoughts will disappear. The memories won't disappear, but the thoughts that make the heart ache will actually go. And it's hard to understand how that happens or that it can possibly happen right at this point until you've done the work. But I'm letting you know from my experience that it happens. So just keep hold of that. And the first step is always to notice, just start noticing how you're feeling during the day. Ask yourself over and over, how am I feeling right now? So that's the first step. So I am doing a virtual retreat in July, 3-day virtual retreat for people to work through a single loss. It can be a loss of anything, but we're going to use these techniques to work through that loss and hopefully come out on the other side, right? Feeling the peace and the relief, and hopefully those thoughts will disappear. So that's one exciting thing that's going to be happening in July of 2025. And other than that, I do have a YouTube channel and I share a lot of information. I'm very active on Facebook. I do have my book, A Pathway to Insight, and I have a workbook that goes with it that will help drudge up all the things that you can work on, that you can tap on if you want to. And my website has the x-rays on it. You know, people can see that this really does make a huge difference. So there we go. Thank you.
Oh, you are very welcome. Thank you. As always, listeners, Ann's contact information, website will all be listed in the podcast notes. So don't feel bad if you didn't have a pen or pencil with you. Just look in the podcast notes. It's right there. I do hope that you will visit her website. I do hope if you are suffering at all, you will consider her virtual retreat, because that would be the perfect way to get yourself started with tapping. And, you know, it's one of those very simple things, and I've used simple a lot, but here's a simple theory for you. What have you got to lose? Nothing. Because once you get involved in it, there's no cost. So it's time, and we all say be patient with yourselves. Take the time you need to grieve. Do what you need to make yourself feel better. And we offer this process. We offer access to her book, her resources, and remember that free download she has if you visit her website. And that may help you get started and may help you find some relief from the pain you are feeling in your grief journey. So having said all that, remember to take care of yourselves. Isn't that what we were just talking about? Taking care of ourselves? And come back again next time as we all continue to live and grieve. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or do you have a question from one of our episodes? Please email us at info@asiliveandgrieve.com and let us know. We hope you will find a moment to leave a review, send an email, and share with others. Join us next time as we continue to live and grieve together.